Angels with Dirty Faces is a collection of short stories from Casey Watson. This was released originally in 2018. And the reason I'm talking about this is to basically say this exists and it's probably a cheaper option than buying all of the short stories individually. I have actually reviewed all of these separately and I will talk very briefly about the kinds of stories that are in this. But more than that, it's just to make people aware that actually this does exist. So if you're quite new to Casey Watson's books and you're maybe, I don't know, just going through them in terms of publication date, this one might be a cheaper option than buying all five of them separately. And it is a decent collection because it is very varied. We have, I'd say, no two stories are the same. And it's a nice way to sample different kinds of foster carer memoirs, particularly if you're new to this kind of read, and it can help you to realize the kinds of stories that might gel with you better. Some are obviously better than others, but I do think there's a good variety here. So if you haven't read or bought any of the stories that are published before this, before the collection was compiled, then it might actually be a nice little collection. Just for reference, at the time of recording this, it's $3.99 on Amazon, and I'd say that that's not a bad price for five quite interesting narratives. So I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail because I have discussed these separately, but very briefly, without spoilers, we have The Little Princess, which is a story about a little girl called Darby who, without going into any detail that will get me demonetized on YouTube, is the victim of a ring. And very explicit videos are uploaded to, very dark parts of the web. And it is a very brief story. They're all very brief, of course. They're all about maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on the story. And it's, it's a pretty dark way to start off the collection, put it that way. Very, very interesting and eye-opening, but quite a challenging one to read. We also have No Place for Nathan, which is about a boy who Casey actually meets when she works at the unit at school. So this one isn't actually a foster care memoir. This is before she became a foster carer. And Nathan displays some disturbing behaviours that suggest perhaps alternative personalities, but I can't go into too much detail. Unfortunately, this one we don't get enough information that I felt like I was satisfied with the information we'd been given. I was definitely left wanting more, but at the same time, I don't feel like we were deprived of any information Casey had. And it really helps to highlight that when you work in a school or work with young people, your hands are tied by the processes that, for example, social services go by. And it's frustrating, but I feel like that's the frustration Casey would have felt. So in that regard, it's quite eye-opening. Then we have Daddy's Boy, which is about a very young boy, I think a 5-year-old boy called Paulie, who went into care after his parents put him into care, his mother and stepfather, and not much happens. I'll be honest, this is a weak link. It's pretty badly written. It doesn't add anything. There's no value to the story. It definitely doesn't provide any interesting insights into why Paulie might behave the way he does. It's very, very rushed. It's not great. It really isn't. But the rest of them are okay. But that one it's a bit of a weak link. Then we have The Wild Child, which on the flip side is incredibly detailed, incredibly eye-opening, and very frustrating to read. It's about an 8-year-old boy called Connor, who is one of the most horrendously misbehaved children of any foster care memoir I've ever read. He is taken into foster care after he beats up his social worker with a metal pole while he's staying in a secure unit. He is taken to Casey's house in basically a secure prison van, something to that effect. And his behaviour is horrendous, and it's challenging to read because it's so frustrating. And yes, there are questions about why he's behaving this way. We don't really get those answers, but he is only with Casey for a very short time. So it's fascinating, it's gripping, but it is frustrating. And then we have Scarlet's Secret, which is another one where Casey was working with young people before she became a foster carer. And it's about Scarlett and her twin sister Jade. And to put it bluntly, Jade smells. And some of the other young people begin to bully her for this. And Scarlett begins to open up about something that happened to her and Jade in the past. And perhaps that's why Jade's hygiene is not great. And it is interesting, and I feel like it helps to show that with the right support, people can consider getting the help they need. But I won't say any more than that. So we have 5 very unique stories, and 4 of them are definitely worth reading. I feel like Daddy's Boy just was not very well written, didn't really serve a purpose, didn't teach me anything, didn't lift the veil on any mysteries of, certain situations that children have to live in. It wasn't great. But the other ones definitely have some interesting aspects. So if you've never read any of these, I'd say this is absolutely the best option to go with. They are all available on Amazon separately, so if you've already read a couple, it might be financially better to read the others separately, depending on how much things cost at the time that you're listening to me. But either way, I would recommend it. It is a good way to get a sample of the different kinds of cases that foster carers deal with and the different kinds of children they meet. I'd say most of these are quite extreme examples, but at the same time, some of them are tamer than some of the more full length stories. Either way, Angels with Dirty Faces is generally a pretty good collection. Generally well written, a lot of very long winded, waffly sentences with like 5 or 6 commas and a couple of brackets per sentence. The grammar is not the best, but it's not unreadable. And whether you're new to foster care memoirs, new to Casey Watson, or you've just not read any of these yet, I'd say it's worth it. Most of the stories are pretty good and definitely worth reading.